The train's whistle broke the silence of the Montana plains as Sarah Mitchell stepped off the wooden platform, with her worn suitcase clutched tightly in her hand. The vastness of the land stretched endlessly, the horizon painted in muted golds and greys by the fading sun. At 25, she had left behind the only world she knew in Boston, the bustling streets and the suffocating uncertainty of factory life. A single advertisement in the newspaper had led her here. Widowed rancher seeks capable woman for cooking and household management. Good wages, respectable arrangement. What the ad hadn't promised, but Sarah would soon learn, was that the rancher was not some weather-beaten recluse scraping by, but a man of wealth, standing, and unspoken sorrow. As she adjusted her coat against the evening chill, a tall man approached. His broad shoulders filled out a dark coat, and a finely shaped Stetson shaded his eyes. When he removed it, Sarah, and caught the pale gleam of blue eyes that seemed kind yet guarded, softened by years of hard living and responsibility. "Miss Mitchell." His voice was steady, touched by the gravel of long days calling across pastures. "Yes, sir. Mr. Whitmore, I presume," she replied, straightening her back though her nerves gnawed at her. "Just James will do." His hand gestured toward a sleek black automobile that glimmered as though freshly polished. "I trust the journey wasn't too difficult." Sarah climbed into the car, uncertain whether her nerves or the vehicle's power made her hands tremble. The ride took them through miles of rolling hills and grazing cattle until the iron gates of Whitmore Ranch came into view. Her breath caught. A sprawling two-story house rose against the backdrop of endless prairie, its wide porches and flower beds hinting at a feminine touch now faded into neglect. "My wife passed 3 years ago," James said quietly, his gaze fixed ahead, as though speaking to himself. "I've managed with hired help, but a house like this, well, you'll see." Inside, the house was grand but lifeless. Polished mahogany furniture sat cloaked under dust sheets, curtains hung stiff, and the air carried a silence too deep for a home meant for laughter and warmth. James led her into the kitchen, a room with modern fittings, but one that bore the echo of abandonment. "Your room is upstairs," he explained, tone all business. "Breakfast is at 6, lunch at noon, dinner at 7. I'll pay you $30 a month, plus room and board." It was generous for 1924, more than the textile factory in Boston had ever offered. Sarah gave a small nod, her voice calm though her heart pounded. "Thank you, James. I won't disappoint you." The first days blurred together with routines. Sarah cooked hearty meals and polished away years of neglect, her hands finding life in what had gone cold. James kept to himself, eating quickly before returning to the land and his herds. He was polite, always respectful, but distance lingered in the air between them like frost that would not thaw. On a damp Thursday evening, while Sarah scrubbed the kitchen, she heard the light patter of footsteps. Turning, she saw a little girl, perhaps 6, her curls tangled and eyes the same shade of blue as her father's. She hesitated in the doorway, as though fearing she might be chased away. "Hello there," Sarah said gently, drying her hands. "You must be—" "Emma," the child whispered, as though her name itself might cause trouble. "Papa said I shouldn't bother you." Sarah's chest tightened. In all her time at the ranch, James had not once mentioned having a daughter. "Well, Emma, you're not bothering me at all. Are you hungry?" The girl nodded, and Sarah filled a plate with warm stew and bread. Emma ate slowly, her posture careful, her manners polished but too practiced, like someone desperate not to cause offense. "Where do you usually eat?" Sarah asked. "In my room. Papa says I should stay upstairs when working people are around." Sarah's heart cracked at the words. Kneeling to meet the child's eyes, she whispered, The kitchen is much nicer, don't you think? It's where all the good smells live. Emma smiled, shy, but real. That night, Sarah waited in the parlor until James returned from the pastures. He looked weary, his shirt stained with dust, but she stood to face him with a firmness she had not yet shown. "We need to talk," she began. "Is something wrong with your arrangements?" he asked, startled. "Your daughter came to me tonight." His face hardened immediately. "I told her not to disturb you. I'll speak with her." "Stop." Sarah's tone was gentle but resolute. "She's 6 years old, James. She eats alone in her room like she's done something wrong. Do you even see her?" James stiffened. "I take care of Emma." "Do you? Do you brush her hair? Ask about her day? She's a child raising herself." His hands clenched at his sides. "You don't understand. Every time I look at her, I see." His voice broke. "Your wife." Sarah finished softly. His silence was answer enough. "You're not alone in grief," she whispered. "Emma lost her mother the same day you did. She doesn't need to be punished for being a reminder. She needs her father." The next morning, Sarah laid out 3 plates instead of 2. Emma sat at the table, hair freshly braided, talking excitedly about barn kittens. James froze in the doorway, his eyes torn between the past and the present. "Papa," Emma beamed. "Sarah showed me how to fold napkins like flowers." James hesitated, then pulled out a chair and sat. "That's nice, Emma." It was a small step, but one that made Sarah's heart swell. Over the following weeks, something fragile yet beautiful began to take shape. Emma came alive under Sarah's care, laughter returning to her voice, curiosity brightening her eyes. James, though slow to change, began to linger at the table, joining conversations, watching his daughter with something close to awe. "She should be in school," Sarah remarked one evening as Emma played with her doll. "It's too far to town," James replied, frowning. "Then she needs a tutor. She's clever, James. She deserves an education, friends, a future." James studied Sarah, his expression softening. "You really care for her?" "Of course I do," she answered, almost sharply. "She deserves love. She deserves more than loneliness." James's gaze lingered, warmer than before. "You're not just the hired help anymore, are you?" Sarah's cheeks flushed. In truth, the lines had blurred. She looked forward to James's quiet stories in the evenings, the way he smiled more freely, and how his eyes softened when they rested on Emma or on her. One stormy night, Sarah was roused by Emma's cries. She found the child trembling from a nightmare, whispering about her mother's voice calling out to her. Sarah soothed her, humming an old lullaby until Emma drifted into peaceful sleep. She used to sing to her like that. Sarah turned to see James in the doorway, emotion shadowing his face. He stepped into the room, his voice low. "Elizabeth had a voice that filled the house. After she died, I couldn't bear bedtime stories or songs. It hurt too much." "Emma needs them," Sarah replied softly. "She needs you." From then on, bedtime became sacred. James read stories, his voice breaking but steady, while Sarah braided Emma's hair. Together they tucked her in. Slowly, the house filled with warmth, laughter, and something Sarah had never known in her own life: belonging. One snowy evening, Emma looked up with her piercing innocence and asked, "Miss Sarah, are you going to marry Papa?" Sarah's heart lurched. "Sweetheart, I came to work, not—" "But don't you love us?" Emma's voice was small yet certain, and Sarah realized she did. Somewhere between meals and stories, she had fallen in love with the little girl who clung to her and with the quiet, grieving man who was learning to live again. The question echoed long after Emma ran off. leaving Sarah speechless. When she finally met James's eyes in the doorway, she knew the truth was already written between them. "Sarah," he said softly, stepping closer. "These past months, you've given me back my daughter. You've given us both a home again. I never expected this, but I've fallen in love with you, not just for Emma's sake, for mine." Sarah's breath caught as tears welled. His confession broke down the last of her careful walls. He was no longer just an employer, no longer a distant figure weighted by sorrow. He was a man offering her a place in his heart, and a little girl asking for a mother. The arrangement that had begun with duty was transforming into something else entirely. Something fragile, yet stronger than anything Sarah had known. Something like love. Snow fell thick over the Montana plains, blanketing the land in silence and turning the world outside the Whitmore Ranch into a vast, unbroken whiteness. Inside, however, warmth had returned in a way Sarah Mitchell had never expected. Where once there had been a cold emptiness in the great house, there were now the sounds of Emma's laughter echoing down the hallways, the low rumble of James's voice reading bedtime stories, and the soft creak of rocking chairs on the porch as the evenings drew long. Yet with warmth came questions, quiet uncertainties that nestled in Sarah's heart when the house grew still at night. She had come to Montana for work, for survival, not for love. And yet love had found her, slowly, carefully, like a seed that sprouted in winter against all odds. Emma had been the first to see it. Children often knew things before adults admitted them. Her innocent question about marriage had pierced Sarah's guarded heart, forcing her to confront what she already felt, but had not dared to name. She loved Emma fiercely, with the devotion of a mother. But the greater risk lay in James. Loving, a man who had lost so much, who carried his grief like a second skin, was dangerous. What if he could not fully let her in? What if she lost them both after giving her whole heart? The following weeks blurred with routine, but carried undercurrents Sarah could not ignore. James lingered in the kitchen longer now, not just for meals, but for conversation. He asked about her life in Boston, listened intently when she spoke of her family, and sometimes smiled in ways that made her chest ache. His reserve had not vanished completely, but his eyes had softened, and he had begun to hum absent-mindedly, while working in the barn, a habit Emma had noticed with delight. "Papa hums now," Emma whispered one morning as Sarah braided her hair. "He never used to." It was a simple thing, but to Sarah it meant everything. One evening, while Emma worked diligently at her letters, Sarah found herself alone with James on the porch. The snow outside glittered under the moonlight, and the air between them felt charged with unspoken words. "You've changed this house," James said quietly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I only cleaned and cooked," she replied, though her voice trembled. "No." He turned to her, his gaze steady. "You gave Emma her childhood back. You gave me a reason to come home at the end of the day. I'd forgotten what that felt like." Sarah's breath caught, and she lowered her eyes, unsure how to hold the weight of his honesty. "I only did what anyone with a heart would have done." "Not anyone," he said, "only you." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It stretched between them like a thread, fragile but unbroken, binding them closer than words. Winter passed slowly into spring, and with it came renewal. The ranch thawed under the sun, calves were born in the fields, and Emma filled the house, with drawings, questions, and the endless chatter of a child who finally felt safe. Sarah noticed James watching her more often, his expression no longer guarded but thoughtful, as if he were measuring not just her presence in his house, but in his life. One afternoon, while kneading bread in the kitchen, Sarah caught sight of him through the window. He was breaking a young horse in the corral, his movements patient but commanding, his strength evident with every shift of the reins. She realized with startling clarity how deeply she admired him, not only for his physical presence but for his resilience, his quiet devotion to the land and his daughter. Her chest tightened with a mixture of longing and fear. She was falling fully, irrevocably in love. The turning point came on another stormy night. Emma had woken from a dream, sobbing for her mother, and Sarah had soothed her until James arrived. Together they had sat by the child's bed, James reading softly while Sarah braided Emma's curls. It had been a simple moment, but in that room, with Emma nestled between them, Sarah had felt something permanent take root. This was what family felt like. Not the cold loneliness she had grown up with, not the hard survival of factory life, but the warmth of belonging. Still, doubts lingered. Would James truly want her beyond gratitude, or was she destined to remain only the caretaker, the one who filled a void, but could never replace what had been lost? Her answer came sooner than she expected. One evening in late March, as the sun dipped low, James entered the kitchen carrying a small box. Emma trailed behind him, her eyes bright with secrets. Sarah looked up from the stew pot, startled. "Sarah," James began, his voice unsteady. He set the box on the table and opened it, revealing a simple gold band that glowed in the lamplight. "When you came here, I hired you to cook, to keep house, but you've given us so much more. You've given me back my daughter. You've given me back myself. I can't imagine this home without you, and I don't want to." Emma clasped her hands together, her face lit with anticipation. "Say yes, Miss Sarah." Sarah's breath caught as tears stung her eyes. The life she had left behind in Boston felt like a distant dream compared to this moment, this family. Slowly she lifted her gaze to James, whose blue eyes now shone not with grief, but with hope. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, her voice steady. "Yes, James, I will." Emma squealed with joy, throwing her arms around Sarah. James's relief was palpable as he took Sarah's hand, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit as though it had always belonged there. The weeks leading to the wedding were a blur of preparations. The townsfolk of Cedar Ridge rallied around them, delighted by the news. Women from the church helped sew Sarah's dress, while the men prepared the small chapel for the ceremony. Emma was beside herself with excitement, rehearsing her role as flower girl until she nearly wore out the petals she scattered on the parlor floor. On a bright spring morning, Sarah walked down the aisle of the little wooden church, her heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and joy. The pews were filled with ranch hands, townspeople and neighbors who had watched James endure years of sorrow and now welcomed this renewal of hope. James stood at the altar, his suit pressed, his expression solemn yet softened by the weight of love. When their eyes met, the world seemed to fall away. The vows were simple, heartfelt promises spoken in trembling voices. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the applause of the congregation was drowned out only by Emma's delighted cheer as she threw her arms around them both. Life after the wedding took on a new rhythm. Sarah was no longer merely the hired help. She was Sarah Whitmore, wife and mother, partner in both the home and the ranch. She shared the burdens of responsibility with James, managing accounts, preparing meals for the ranch hands, and ensuring Emma's lessons continued. But she also shared the joys, long rides across the prairie, evenings on the porch as the sun dipped low, and the quiet intimacy of love rediscovered. For James, the change was profound. Where once his days ended in silence, they now ended with laughter, conversation, and the gentle touch of the woman who had healed what grief had broken. For Emma, the transformation was even greater. She thrived under Sarah's care, blossoming into a lively child full of questions, dreams, and a joy that no longer felt fragile. Yet even in happiness, challenges arose. Ranching was hard work, unpredictable, and often brutal. Storms threatened, Cattle droughts tested their resources, and illness swept through the community more than once. But through it all, Sarah stood by James's side, her strength and determination unwavering. Together, they faced every hardship, not as individuals, but as a family. On the first anniversary of their wedding, James surprised Sarah with a gift, a locket containing 2 miniature portraits, one of Emma and one of himself. "So you'll always carry us with you," he said softly as he clasped it around her neck. Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she pressed the locket to her chest. "I already do," she whispered. Years later, Emma would recall those moments as the foundation of her happiest memories. The warmth of the kitchen, filled with the smell of baking bread, the evenings spent reading together by lamplight, and the way her parents, as she came to call them both, tucked her into bed every night. For Sarah, the journey that had begun with uncertainty on a train platform in Montana had led her to a love she had never dared to dream of. She had not only found a husband and daughter, but also a home, a future, and a sense of belonging that no advertisement could have promised. Every night as she and James tucked Emma in, Sarah remembered the simple, piercing question that had changed everything. "Can she tuck me in too?" It was the moment when 3 lonely souls had chosen one another, when a house became a home, and when love against all odds turned strangers into family. And in that choice, Sarah knew she had not only answered Emma's question, but also the deepest question of her own heart, where she truly belonged.